YouTube to see if it's live or not.
Oh, let's see. Let me refresh.
Okay, we're good.
Whoa.
Okay, we are live.
I don't believe you.
We are live. It's really happening. Okay, hello everybody. My name is Roy Arthur Blodgett, and I'm your host today, joined as always by my intrepid, handsome, and charismatic co-host, Mr. Philip Leitz of Arids Only.
Yo.
And we have some amazing guests today who we're excited to introduce and talk to about all things Abronia. But before we do that, I just want to give a quick shout out to Happy Dragons for making this possible. And Happy Dragons is offering this incredible subscription service called Happy Dragons Plus, which you can see on the screen here right now. Savannah is kindly scrolling through the different offerings and channels on the Happy Dragons Plus homepage there. So we have a content calendar with our upcoming live events like this webinar stream, roundtable, live podcast, that kind of thing. We also have some channels where folks can share all kinds of stuff about their reptiles, what's going on with them, if they have questions, just interesting observations that they're having. And there's also some amazing content there from Mariah from Reptiles. We also just have some like fun picture channels where people can share pet pics. And then in addition to that, we also have some really helpful stuff like Q&A forums for consulting from Mariah Healy at Reptiles and some other reptile experts on the Happy Dragons platform. And also there's some cool options to submit questions and stuff like that to eventually appear on later live Q&As and that kind of thing. So yeah, check it out. Happy Dragons Plus. There's a free subscription. It's linked in the video description. Give it a try and let us know what you think. So yeah, with that, let's get into it.
Let's get into it.
First, I would like to introduce our guests. So we have Savannah Noland from Perfect Q LLC and Ollie from Wholesome Herbs. Thank you so much for joining today, y'all.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
And I hope everyone bears with me. I'm sorry for quality and any mishaps. If something catches on fire, it's not my fault. It's Roy's fault.
Blame it on me.
I've been blaming it on Roy all day.
I would like happily accept all the blame. I have this effect on technology, so it's something that we've just learned as we've been going along with Project Herpetoculture so far. So I will shoulder the criticism. But anyway. To begin, I would love to hear a little bit from both Savannah and Ollie. Can we hear a little bit about each of your herpetoculture origin stories? Just how you got started with herpetoculture in the beginning?
Do you want to go first or should I?
Oh yeah, mine's quick and easy. I really don't have one. Nothing impressive. Back in high school was like I learned about tegus and really wanted one. Thankfully didn't get one. Years later, like 3, 4, maybe 5 years later, my first reptile was a tegu. I don't have him anymore, but he was cool, but he was a jerk. Not for me. And yeah, I just kind of dabbled with different species and just eventually ended up to what I keep now. That's really my story. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. What about you, Ollie?
Okay. So sorry if I'm lagging a bit. I've noticed like a little bit of lag. But basically I started with ball pythons. So I got my first ball python when I was like 22. And then I immediately started diving deep into breeding them. Like I was really active in like the ball python breeding space. But I didn't really like the whole incubation process. So I ended up kind of just like selling out of that. And I kept my first ever ball python though. He's still with me and he's going to be with me forever. I moved on to rescuing. So I did a lot of rescue work because I worked at a pet store at the time. And so people would just come in, they'd dump their ball pythons on me. Like people would find some that were abandoned in a house. Like people would just decide they didn't want anymore. And then they would give them to me. Everybody knew that I was like the guy to go to. And so I did a lot of rescuing. I did a lot of rehabilitation for like really basic reptiles. And when I moved here to Colorado, I had some spare room in my house, and I was like, I'd really like to try something arboreal. So I found Abronia, and I got my first ever one. We just checked in January of 2023. I got my very first Abronia Oaxaca, and I didn't really know what I had at that time. I just thought it was like a really cool lizard. So I didn't understand like all of the history behind them, and like how there's this really challenging community surrounding like breeding and stuff. So I decided I'm going to get some more. And so I think within like 6 months, I had like 12 Abronia. And so wow. I really dove like head into Abronia for sure.
That's awesome. So cool. So, Savannah, when did you start with Abronia?
I got Lex 3 years ago, and I was kind of similar to Ollie in a way where I got into Abronia because I wanted something arboreal, and was actually very fortunate to meet someone who had a litter of captive born Abronia, and they trusted me and like basically told me everything I needed to know, how I could make it happen. I'm still friends with that person to this day. They're an awesome person. And yeah, I had no idea of the reality of the species. Like it was kind of in a way neglectful, and I'm kind of making up for that now because I didn't know they were smuggled, endangered, CITES Appendix 2 and 1. Yeah, I really had no idea. I didn't start my Abronia breeding project with my focus being on Arita until last year. I got my first pair of Arita in June, I think. And I actually had a funny mishap. I took both of them to the vet because I really trust my vet, and had ultrasounds done on both of them, and they were pretty positive they saw follicles on both of them. So I thought, crap, I don't have a pair. I have 2 females. And so I had to start trying to find a male. And then it turned out that I did have a pair, and it just kind of evolved into having all these pretty boys and 1 female, and trying to balance that scale has been a battle I've been fighting up until this year.
Wow. Yeah. So I think that, it might be good to talk just for like listeners who might not be super familiar with Abronia, like to give a little bit more context to the genus and like the complexities of all that. You obviously, Savannah, you just alluded to it there, but I think offering a little bit more like context for folks might be interesting to hear. And I'd be curious to hear it from y'all if you'd be willing.
Yeah, I'm going to let Savannah take that one. I'm going to let Savannah take that question.
I'll do my best to maintain my filter.
Yeah, because I can't filter myself.
Where do you even start? Here, start asking questions and I'll answer them.
Okay.
Well,
so
I guess, yeah, go Phil.
Yeah, no. I was going to ask, like, what you said that you talked about kind of getting involved in Abronia and getting interested in Abronia, and then subsequently kind of finding out about what one might say their sordid history or what have you. So can you talk a little bit more about, can you elaborate on that? And can you talk about what that felt like getting involved and then finding that out?
Yeah, absolutely. So around the time I found out the reality of the species being heavily smuggled and being mismarketed completely or exploited is the better word, was because when I got my Graminia, my first Abronia about 3 years ago, it was about $475 for her. And I kind of dropped off the hobby, just focused on the animals I had. And when I came back last year, the prices had more than doubled. So that was kind of the first shock I got. And it was actually really horrifying. So that was definitely when I started looking more into it and realizing, okay, invest in the communities. Like there's some Facebook groups, I'm in a bunch of them. There's some chats, I'm in a bunch of those, and just learning from other people that a bunch of people selling animals didn't breed them. A a lot of them are fresh wild caught. You can tell by their colors with most species. I'm not so familiar with all species to just be able to point at one and know, but there are a lot of indicators. But yeah, no, definitely seeing that price point. And I think that's kind of why Ollie and I bonded too, because we thought it was just absolutely insane. People are buying these animals, risking their health, thinking they're going to make tons of money selling a lizard for $2,000.
Mm-hmm.
And it just doesn't work that way because there's so few people in the United States that are actually successfully breeding them. Like a majority of the Abronia we see are at best captive born. There are a few people who are captive born and breeding them, but people will get smuggled females that will already be gravid. They'll get those babies. A lot of those babies die, unfortunately. Yes. A lot of them. Yeah. And that's another issue too, is the people buying or getting fresh wild caught Abronia. They're unacclimated. I see tons of problems they come in with because the smuggling process is horrible. Like, you see on the internet about the guy who gets busted at the airport for having lizards in his underwear. That's exactly it. They're thrown into a sack or a bucket, smuggled in someone's underwear or however, and then they're peddled off to the person for a reasonable price, and that person has no idea that this animal needs special care. All the deficiencies, the dehydration, the NBD, like there's no disclosure in the hobby when it comes to the animals. They have zero protection.
Yeah. If I could piggyback off of that, like I will say that there are innocent victims of that. Like not everybody, people will go into this and they'll see these really cool animals and the ones that they have for sale are like really expensive or whatever. And so they find a lower priced option, which is usually like a smuggled animal. It could be freshly wild caught and they'll immediately be drawn to it. And it could be so easy to like accidentally fall into something like that. And then you have this like animal that needs really specialized care and you have no idea what you're doing with it. And you've still wasted your money. And now the animal has perished. Like and it's really frustrating to me specifically and I know Savannah, this is something that we bond over. We talk about very frequently, where it's very frustrating for us to be working so hard to like actually establish this species in captivity. And then to see people who are purposefully like buying freshly wild caught animals that they know are going to be gravid, having these babies, like marketing these babies as captive born and sometimes captive bred. Even though like there are some species where you can tell looking at a glance that it's freshly off the tree, that someone had just grabbed it, stuffed it in a sock and sent it to the United States. Like you can tell, like you can get an eye for that. And I will see things like that. And it's really frustrating because I can see a fresh wild caught female and then all of a sudden 3 weeks later, this person has babies from this female and they're advertising it. Some people will like put people on wait lists, for these babies that they have to pay for. And at the it's terrible. It's really terrible. And so that's something that like Savannah and I are really focused on stopping. Like we really want to get an established network together where people can offer up their expertise. Not only that, but like share their failures. Like I failed a lot in the last year, but I've also had like a lot of success. And to like have that kind of community where we can say like, hey, this person just posted babies. Do you know anything about them? Is there any history on these animals? Things like that. So I think that we've hit the ground kind of running on it. And I'm really hoping to see it grow a lot in the next couple of years, especially with the success that like some of us have had with breeding. And to kind of get like a more trustworthy network of breeders and buyers, somewhere that buyers can go and know that the animals that they're getting are not going to be harmed in any way or come from like a background of being harmed, like an already difficult situation that you're taking on.
I want to add a point too, based on what Ollie said, is like, so you'll usually see like two situations. People will either be trying to sell a gravid female and making it sound like it's a really good idea because she's gravid, you're going to have babies. And you're thinking, oh, cool, I'll be able to sell them and make back my money times, I don't know, Ollie, how many babies do they normally have? Like 9 to 15?
I mean, they can have, when I had So like I actually got into a situation where someone that I knew for a very long time and trusted ended up like having these babies, and I took the babies on, and I realized what I had gotten myself into, and it was 9. That female had 9 babies. Going from 0 to 9 babies for one animal is extremely difficult. But some of them can have
job.
Yeah, it's a full-time job. It is extremely difficult. And I know that some females can have up to like 15, depending on the species. It's very species dependent. Yeah.
And probably size of the female too, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and the age.
Yeah.
Age has a lot to do with it. And so you can have a litter. I mean, at this point, I have confirmed like 3 gravid females. And I don't know how many babies they're going to have. That's why I had to take on like another partner. But they could each have, for all I know, 9 to 15 babies. Like, I can't do that by myself. Come on.
Yeah.
And those babies shouldn't be sold until they're at least 6 months old. There's no like proof behind it, but the consensus is those babies aren't considered stable until they're 6 months old. And most people aren't even comfortable selling them until they're a year old. So this is not a species you get to make money off of.
No, that's something that me and Savannah talk about a lot. Like, it's another frustrating part of this is to see people who are getting in it like clearly for the money, and they're everywhere, you know, like it's you can tell by talking to them for a little while, but like you can't get into this for the money, because I compare it to like throwing a bunch of money into a burning pit and hoping eventually the fire will get put out, you know, but it's really something you have to be passionate about. You have to be in it for like the conservation, because you're not going to be making money off of it.
And we've also welcomed a few people into the Discord who got them wanting to breed them to make money. They didn't outright say that, but as they learned the care requirements for them, they kind of like, not even so much privately, it said, hey, I'm going to sell these. Are any of you interested?
Yeah. Yeah, this whole dynamic with like, you know, wild caughts coming in and, you know, dropping litters, and it kind of reminds me of some stuff that like Phyllis shared in the past too about like Euros, where people are, you know, advertising Euros as captive bred, and like for him it's like, you know, he can tell from a mile away, you know, like, oh, that's not what that is, you know. And I see the same kind of thing with some of the species I keep. It seems pretty common. But I guess like just before, I mean, I want to pick your brains more on like the care and also like raising the neonates, all that stuff. But before we get into that, I'm curious just to like hear a little bit more from y'all about what specifically draws you to Abronia. Like, what is it about these lizards that really stands out, makes them special, you know, sets them apart from, you know, all the other taxa that are out there? Because they do seem like, I mean, obviously just visually, they're just really stunning animals. But I know there's more to it than that.
I might be biased because when I got Lex, I got her fully prepared that she would be like a display animal and hands off, look but don't touch. But it turns out she's super social. Like if you go on my Instagram, you'll see her. She'll get on my hand, she'll crawl on my shirt, she'll just hang out with me, she'll play in the wood bin. And that's
super bold.
Why I fell in love with Abronia, because they're actually incredibly intelligent. But I can't recommend anyone an Abronia based on that, because I have had individuals. I know people who have individuals who are extremely reclusive. They hide. They don't come out unless you feed them. It takes a really long time for them to get moderately comfortable. And this is a species that does not handle stress well at all. But for me personally, and maybe Phil can agree with this, I have a thing for the spiky reptiles. Like that's why I love Agurnia. Like the Hosmeri were my dream species, and I was thrilled to get them. I've got some Stokes Eye, and then like when I learned about like Smith Eye, Arita, like the horns, I don't know, it does it for me. Like it's just adorable. And so I'm still going to lean on the fact that maybe I'm just really lucky, because all of the Abronia I keep, except for one, a little shrimp, she hates me. Oh, and the Lythro, she hates me too. But the rest, they're wonderful. Like they're tolerant of me. They have their attitude sometimes. They have their own personalities. It's very obvious. They're really, really smart. But I just love interacting with them, and they're just the most beautiful things I've ever seen when it comes to reptiles.
Mhm.
That's how I feel about it. So biased, maybe I'm lucky, maybe I just have a knack with animals, like, like the lizard green thumb. But
Mhm.
Yes, I would say so. I would definitely say so.
What about you,
Um,
Ollie? Why do they stand out?
So like I knew about Abronia graminia. Like they're the ones that when you think of Abronia, it's like the first thing that comes to mind. They're green. Sometimes when people believe that there are some blue ones, but really like we figured out that that's more of like a lighting issue. For me, my first Abronia was an Abronia Oaxaca, and I picked him because if you look at them, they to me, I think that they look like little earth dragons. Like they look like something completely out of like a sci-fi movie. Or like some sort of like fantasy thing. And I just
Totally.
They're all edges, they've got like the really cool back horns and they look so different from other Abronia species. And I feel like I'm in a really good position right now because they're my favorite species. They're my species of choice. They're the ones that I like. I'm really working with really hard. And nobody knows about them. Like nobody knows about them. Nobody gives them a second glance because they're not like these flashy, like I have lithros, like I have, I guess people pronounce it differently. I pronounce it lithoquilas. Like I have more lithros than I do Oaxaca, and they are gorgeous. Like, don't get me wrong. They have a beautiful spotted pattern, but like for me, like I really find joy in the kind of like neutral colors. So that's what drew me to the Oaxaca. That's what drew me to my first one. And when I first bought him, I didn't have any intention of doing anything with him. I also bought him as a display pet. And I will tell you, he is so mean. like he is like a horrible little beast. Like we actually found out that Abronia are capable of hissing because of that one guy, that one little Oaxaca. So yeah, I'm really into them. I really like focus my projects on them and moving forward. Like I would like to start like a real network of Oaxaca keepers.
Cool.
Nice.
Yeah, I like the Oaxaca. How are they like comparative in terms of size? How do they compare to like Lithokyla? Are they a bit smaller?
So they are smaller. I find them to be a lot smaller. I have one anomaly who is massive, and I don't know why. I think it might be his age. I bought him from someone who claimed he was captive born and that he was probably, I don't remember how old they said that he was, but he's definitely older than whatever they said. And he's massive. He's like the size of a lithro. I have pictures of him where he like takes up my whole hand. But all of my other ones are smaller. They're much smaller.
Yeah. They've always struck me as a smaller species, but that's cool.
They really vary. Like I have Lex is tiny, and I picked Lex because she was the biggest out of her litter mates, and she capped out early. And I have one Arita, who's my little shrimpy boy. And the other ones, I've got some big boys too. I've got a big girl too.
Phil, I want to let you get in there. I feel like I've been kind of.
Well, it's okay. I really just want to kind of get into some of the care stuff because that's like a little outside my wheelhouse,
Yeah, let's hear about it. What's the kind of? I mean, obviously, Abronia have super specialized care. You've both already alluded to that, but I'm curious, like, what does that actually look like, and is it different for, wild caught animals versus captive bred? I'm sure it is.
Well, I guess it kind of depends on if you're looking at it from a beginner standpoint or an all or nothing standpoint, because I'm an all or nothing person, and like and Ollie, you'll have to confirm this or not. I would say most comparably, it would be the care for an Abronia would be that to a chameleon.
That is exactly what I would say. That is exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah. So, and this is worth pointing out because out of having an Arita listed on Morph Market for several months, the most interest I got usually ended after explaining the care. Because where the species naturally occur, in Guatemala for the Arita specifically, I've seen the temperatures get over 100 degrees during the day, but no matter what, it always gets down to 50 degrees at night. They need that temperature drop. That is very hard or very expensive to replicate indoors in captivity unless you are a master of HVAC and don't mind throwing thousands of dollars at it, or you are fortunate enough to live somewhere with a basement. Like, there are ways to do it, but there's a lot of setup like that goes into it, a lot of testing. And like, the best I can do, like, I'll be honest, the best I can do is I can move all of them from their enclosures to my cooling room, which is just my bedroom because it's the only room with windows that open, put them in the mesh enclosures, open the windows, and sleep in that room on nights when it gets down to 50 degrees and 40 during winter to cool them for breeding. And I can only do that for a few months a year. Like, that's not ideal, but it's what I am doing right now.
Interesting.
For me, I think I'm very lucky that I live in Colorado. And so not only do I have the advantage of the elevation, which is something that they experience in the wild, but I also have the desert temp drops. So my hardest, bless you, the hardest part of keeping for me is keeping the humidity at like reasonable levels, because in order to keep their temperatures like as close as I can to their temperatures in the wild, is I keep my window open 24/7 for most months out of the year until it gets too hot. Like in the summer, I'll close it and I'll scramble to figure out how to cool them down. But at night, throughout the entire year, because I live in a desert, the temperatures drop. So I'm able to replicate that without all of the stress that Savannah has to unfortunately go through. But
I'm not the only one.
in return, like I kind of to balance that, I have struggles with keeping the humidity up, but I have, like, you can see a huge humidifier behind me. I have like a huge reservoir for their misters that go off like every 3 hours. So yeah, I would say that I'm more, Savannah is definitely an all or nothing keeper. Like you've seen her enclosures. They're just like incredible.
We're going to talk about them.
Yeah, I know I know we have to talk about them. Like I can't believe Savannah's like one of my best friends, and I see her enclosures and I'm like, I have to be doing this wrong. I must be doing this wrong. Like everyone else must be doing this wrong because Savannah's doing this right. But I'm a bit more passive. Like my enclosures, I keep, well, now currently I keep everybody in an individual like medium or large reptiles. I don't even really know off the top of my head. So I kind of approach keeping as like a kind of like a flexible thing, you know, like if I'll try one thing, I'll see if it works. I'll try another thing, see if it works. And right now I've got them kind of set up in a situation that I believe works for them. So, but it is difficult finding that because it's really dependent on where you live and what you can provide them naturally. So you just, in my opinion, I feel like you have to really work off of that. Like start from there.
Totally.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up humidity too, because another thing, if you observe where they are in the wild, they are a high humidity animal, but during the day, the humidity is actually pretty low when it's not raining. They do have seasons where it's just raining every single day, all day. But the most important thing is to lower humidity at night, provide airflow, which is easily done in a mesh enclosure, and at night have the humidity rise, like really, really high. So cold nights, high humidity, and air movement, which obviously are very conflicting things. So like I moved all of my guys to PVC enclosures, and I took a hole saw, mounted 120 millimeter fans that are attached to smart controllers with 80 millimeter fans up top for exhaust, just to have airflow. Because if you keep them in a glass or PVC enclosure, anything solid, you're going to have to use fans. Like you don't want the stagnant air. I haven't actually looked into the science behind that. I feel like maybe one of you guys would know why stagnant air is bad for them.
Well, I think it has to do with just montane species in general. Like when you have like air currents hitting geography where it's like there's rapid difference, you know, in terms of geography, I think that it just creates airflow, you know, like you get pressure moving and dropping along those big structures essentially. And so there's a lot more air movement in mountainous areas than there are in more stagnant kind of protected areas, I guess.
Yeah.
So it makes sense in that way. Like, I also know that like from like tracking and stuff like that, if you're like a lot of animals will bed down in areas where like they're essentially putting themselves downwind of air currents that are coming, so that like as it cools at night, pressure drops, that cold air moves down slope essentially, and with it brings scent. And so like a lot of animals will bed down in a way where they can smell if there's potentially a predator upslope, but such that they can see downslope. Kind of interesting, that kind of stuff, but
Yeah,
it makes sense. Like the whole complexity though of like, needing both humidity and airflow. I mean, this is something that we talk about a lot. I know that Mariah talks about this a lot, and she's always like, like a lot of people are like, oh, I need more humidity. I need to block off the airflow. And Mariah's like, no, like don't do that. Just add humidity, but like make sure that you maintain airflow, because it's really bad to create stagnant environments for herps, But anyway.
And since, because when I see a lot of people that are like in situations similar to like Ollie, where they're panicking over not having the humidity high enough, I'd kind of consider that to be not a misconception, but maybe a misunderstanding, since it doesn't need to be high all day, every day. I know Phil really likes to keep his days pretty sporadic for his reptiles. He doesn't keep things the same. Some days are dark, some days not, wet, dry. That might be something good to look for. But and on to go on to another. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to say that. Sorry, I'm trying to rearrange so I can sit more comfortably here. The chaos element, like which a bunch of other folks have talked about in terms of like inconsistency with what you're providing. It's generally meant as like a guiding rule for the sake of like, making sure you can add in variability, because that's the way the world is, really, really variable. There are places of intense consistency, of course.
Solomon Islands.
That's just how it goes. Or even equatorial places tend to be quite consistent and stable. But I'm just saying that like, it's good in general, just as like a guiding principle for variety, but it doesn't necessarily mean like it's not going to be applicable to every single species, right? There are going to be some that are going to crave a little more or less consistency in various ways, right? It's just more of like a, unless they're a koala where the only thing they can eat is bamboo, which maybe that's not even true anymore. I don't know, but let's just pretend that that's still true. Unless you're like not bamboo, but eucalyptus. Jesus Christ. I'm thinking about a panda. Holy smokes. So this is a horrible example, but if it's not one of those things, then just feed it all kinds of different crap and get wild. But there are some things a little more consistent. There was a terrible example. Jesus Christ.
I loved it.
Well, if only
Savannah, can you kick Phil off, please?
Yeah, but it'll take me 15 minutes to figure out how.
I don't know why I thought bamboo. I was thinking pandas.
I got it. I got what you were trying to say.
But to combine misconceptions and eating bamboo, and another thing that I've seen in care guides written for Abronia is they say to feed them as much as they want. No.
Don't do it.
In captivity, they get so fat. Because they tend to be reclusive. They're far less active. I feed my reptiles one medium or large insect twice a week, and that's what I do to maintain weight. If I give them 3, that's to put on weight. 1, lose a little weight. Like I found like the perfect ratio. I use grasshoppers as a staple. That's not the only thing they get, but if it's like a small roach, like I breed pallets, they'll get like 1 or 2 adults because they're kind of small.
Yeah.
But it's don't feed your Abronia. Don't give them a dish full of dubias, especially because I don't know if they're more prone or not, but reptiles in general, especially when overfed dubias, are prone to gout. And I've seen a lot of Abronias perish with visceral gout.
Yeah, the overweight thing, I have like a perfect example of this. You know who I'm talking about. So yeah, I bought this girl, this female Lithro from Tinley last year, and she was massive. Like we
all thought she was pregnant.
We all thought she was pregnant because there was absolutely no way that like an animal could have this much fat on their body, like at such a small like frame. So immediately, as soon as I get her, I take her to the vet. I do an ultrasound on her, and they find no babies, but she was 74 grams.
Wow.
And I have like,
for reference, my Lithochilla is like 36.
Yeah, like about 30, 35 is like really
exactly.
where they should kind of be. I have some, but I mean, at this point now, she's like 64 grams, and I don't think she's going to be able to get any smaller. That's after a year of like trying to bring her weight down. But it's possible. It's so possible to overfeed them to the point where they are like barely mobile. Like she could barely move when I bought her. So
I think that this is an especially common thing with arboreal reptiles too, which seem to me to be, I mean, they're often very slender, you know, and in build, which makes sense if they're, you know, climbing constantly, they have to be pretty slender to do that well. And I've talked about this in the past, but I had a similar issue with my first time with a Polycris marmoratus, the monkey lizards. I totally was overfeeding my female. I didn't realize it was a similar thing where she was like 75, 80 grams. And I was like, oh, she looks amazing. You know, she's like a super big, healthy one. And like, I've never seen one that big since, you know? And it's like, I realized in hindsight, like, oh, she was totally overfed. And that's like, was not a good way to go.
They're really good at begging too, so it doesn't help.
Oh, it's so hard. It's so hard to say no. They make it so difficult.
Yeah, like I have all of mine tap trained. At the minute the door opens, they pop out of the woodworks, literally.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's good when you can have that kind of relationship with your reptiles where they're happy to see you, you know, even if it is just because you're the food monkey.
Yeah, I work with all my reptiles as much as they let me. I like to bother them, but I don't like force handle them. I just try to get them used to me because I'm just really worried, like if there's ever an emergency, I need to be able to grab them. That's why I build my enclosures without fixing any cork tubes, because taking them to the vet is a nightmare. And stressing them out by trying to prod them out of a tube, ripping down your background that you spent hours on, not for me.
Right, for sure. Definitely, utility is a very important consideration in enclosure design and development and construction. You know, you want to be able to easily access those animals and not have to make it you don't want to have to disassemble the entire setup just to do a deep clean.
Right. Oh, another thing about care that I really, really want to mention, I don't have any founded knowledge on this, but I think, well, there is a little bit. A lot of keepers don't keep Abronia with heat lamps. They just kind of let them bask under UVB. That's not great because to get the temperatures they need, which we're kind of leaning away from surface temperatures too. We're going more towards infrared wavelengths. But they're just going to be way too close to the UVB, and it's not the same type of deep penetrating heat they'd get from fluorescence or tungsten filaments. And I have a suspicion that this is a big factor in why so many people lose their Abronia. And it could be
it makes
related to nutrition, but we're
especially
just not
with like
illness.
gravid females, you know, or females that have litters, like I would think that being able to thermoregulate effectively is like really, really critically important for that, and that they would need that infrared, you know, from proper basking area.
Yeah, but people just think because they're such a cooler kept species, that a heat lamp will burst into flames. But they're still a cold-blooded reptile. I think I don't know if all species. I think someone in the Discord posted yesterday that like Taeniata can like somehow manage to keep their body functions still working even when they're freezing. But I don't remember the term, and I haven't looked into it myself, so I can't.
Poikilothermic, maybe.
Yeah.
able to operate under different
And
body temperatures.
I'm good friends with a keeper in the United Kingdom, Adam Trimmings. He breeds them, and he had, I think it was a litter of Depi. I don't know. He can yell at me if I say it wrong. But he noticed a drastically lower mortality rate in his neonates after providing them with a heat lamp.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me.
That's really interesting. Didn't know that.
I think it's actually part of like an adaptation. I think that a lot of live-bearing reptiles have, I think a lot of that has to do with thermoregulatory capability, like here where I live, we have 2 species of alligator lizards. We have the southern, which is Algaria multicarinata, and then we have the northern, which is Algaria coeruleata. And the northerns are interesting because they are live bearing. They're the only ones in the genus that are live bearing. And I think it's also like instructive that they're also the northernmost species. The species is found all the way up into British Columbia where it gets so cold. And it's like, if you think about it, it's like, oh, it makes a lot of sense that, this would be a live bearing species because it's far more possible for the female to regulate, her internal, the temperature of the eggs internally by her active thermoregulation than it is to just lay a clutch somewhere where they could be subject to much colder temperatures, and much less likely to hatch.
That too, because the dry season, when it starts getting cold, like in Guatemala, Mexico, Chiapas, the timing ends up, since the gestation is like 9 months. These females go through winter pregnant.
Yeah, totally. So. And I bet that they're still coming out on clear days and basking, as they can from their, tree cavities and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. It'd be really interesting to like learn more about that, but really cool. So, one thing I think it'd be really cool to talk about is, as the name Perfect Hue LLC implies, Savannah, you have a reputation as someone who's been really experimenting a lot with this kind of whole dynamic around coloration in captive Abronia and seeking to revitalize or restore their kind of wild-like coloration. So I'm curious if you could speak a little bit to that whole dynamic. Why is their color different in captivity? And also, what are you doing to try and address that?
Well, that's actually one of the best indicators of how you can identify like Graminia and Lithochila if they're fresh wild caught or if they've been in captivity for at least a few months. That's why you see the blue Graminias. They're not naturally occurring. We're pretty sure what happens is that they lose access to their wild diet. We don't know exactly all of what goes into it, but they lose what we have to assume would be a high carotenoid diet. So because carotenoids will do red, yellow, orange, brown colors, and you take blue, you add yellow, you get green.
Mm-hmm.
So I have lots of theories as to maybe what they're missing based on my experiments. I guess I was given advice from someone who I won't name because I'm not friends with them anymore. They're an awful person. But the advice turned out to be right. They recommended to feed kale, and I started seeing results. And since then, I've been kind of doing an analysis on like vitamins. Like there's lots of vitamin A, K, on the types of carotenoids. Like carotenoids fall into two different classes. There's over 600 different types of carotenoids. The only association that I'm leaning into currently is that there is strong evidence or strong speculation that insectivores or carnivores can't fully utilize beta carotene, which is a precursor to vitamin A. So it's not really recommended to use it in a supplement. On paper, beta carotene is perfect because the body only converts as much vitamin A that's needed from beta carotene. So it's like almost impossible to overdose from it. But because these animals can't use it and it's fat soluble, it's stored in the liver long term. And so it just keeps building up and building up and building up if you're using the supplements too often.
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, I've been trying to see if I see the same color changing results using the different class of carotenoids that beta carotene does not fall into, that falls into the class carotenes. I don't know how to pronounce the other one. It's like xanthophylls. But I've been leaning more into that group because I think the vitamins that belong to the class carotenes maybe aren't fully usable by insectivores.
Interesting.
That's actually
Really
a mistake.
interesting.
That's a mistake that I made for a really long time. Because I was told something very similarly, where they would just kind of get rid of whatever they weren't using. And the person who I got my first ever Abronia from told me that they were dusting their Abronia with like some sort of supplement, and with Betty, what is it? It's like calcium plus. Is that what they were using?
With the beta carotene, is it the super pig?
It was a super. I think it was a super pig. He said that he was doing it with a super pig.
Yeah,
and,
I recently learned the super pig has beta carotene in it.
Yeah, so I've had to stop using that. And also I was told to dust their feeders with D3 every week, like once a week. And now I know that like one of their adults that they've had for a really long time is going through renal failure. And that's something that I've been doing because that's what I believed was the correct thing to do. And then I like consulted Savannah on it, and she was like, no, that's so often. And it's just like one of those things where you don't think about, because someone that like has been doing it longer than you know, it's something that they've been doing for so long. But now, because like years have passed, you're starting to see.
What was that?
I don't know. You're starting to see like the effects of that, the negative effects of that, which obviously is renal failure. It's something that I see in chameleons a lot when people oversupplement their chameleons. Which is a species, like I love chameleons, don't get me started on that. But I got myself started. But yeah, that's
too late.
Now it was too late for them. And so now I'm like looking at my animals, because I stopped doing that about a month ago. I'm like looking at my animals like, did I ruin you? Like, are you okay? But I mean, they're fine. It's just like, it's definitely a concern. It's definitely something that like more people should be aware of, is like proper supplementation.
Yeah. It feels like another kind of frontier, like where there's just so much advancement happening right now. I feel like a lot has changed in lighting in the last few years, and just terms of like understanding what's actually, you know, the right combination of lighting and all of that. I feel like a similar thing is happening with supplementation, which is really cool to see, because it's just like, obviously both of these like subjects are so consequential in terms of health for our reptiles. But yeah, I'm curious, I guess, to hear a little bit more about kind of the captive breeding aspect. And I know that Ollie, you've recently had a pretty significant captive breeding success, which I'd be curious to hear about. And then also, like, kind of flowing from that, I'd also be curious to hear about rearing of neonates and why that's such a challenging aspect of Abronia keeping.
I have so much to say. I have so much to say on
Amazing,
both of those points.
because I want to hear it.
So yes, I got word. So, okay, I'll kind of start a little bit from before. I have 2 pairs of Oaxaca, and I had one pair for a while, and then I got another pair. And as far as I know, me and like maybe one other person are in the United States, or like the only people in the United States keeping Oaxaca. If there are more, then they haven't come forward. But as far as I know, you know, and for ever, I mean, for as long as the species has been kept in captivity, there have been nobody's come forward saying that they've been able to successfully breed them in captivity for whatever reason. I spoke to someone who's living in Mexico and has been successful, just recently became successful with breeding them in captivity in Mexico. And he gave me a lot of really wonderful advice. One of the things that he told me is that the females are extremely picky. For whatever reason, the Oaxaca females are extremely picky. So I like breeding Oaxaca has always been kind of like a dream of mine, but it wasn't something that I was like actively, yes.
Picky in what way? What does that mean?
So the females, from our understanding, the females make the decision on whether they allow the male to mate. So I haven't seen that in person, but that's something that I am accepting. Like
I have
I
lots
believe
of
that.
theories on that.
Yeah, there are a lot of theories on that. That's just what I was told by this keeper. And
Yeah. Can I?
Yeah.
No, I never mind. I should let you finish. Just
okay. No worries. So yeah, so the year, you know, I cool them. I cooled them the exact same way that I cooled my other animals because they're all in the same room. And we recently found out I sent my Oaxaca over to my like business partner Thomas because I just needed more room, and you know, I'm going through stuff with college and stuff. I'm like, I don't have a lot of like mental bandwidth. And he took them to his vet to get ultrasounded, and we found out that my Oaxaca is gravid. So that is really, really huge because as far as we know, she is the first, like potentially the first, if not one of the first females to ever breed in captivity in the United States.
Awesome.
Yes. So
I'm pretty stoked to see
I am like over the moon. Like that's like the holy grail. I feel like Steve Irwin would be really excited. So that's what keeps me going. And then also my Lithochila were also gravid, and I believe that mine that I kept here is gravid potentially. What's up?
Oh, you just and yeah, the light they're just gravid.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
that was really exciting.
Just
too.
throw it in there.
It was really exciting too because it was my first season. It was my first try. So like, you know, everybody talks about how difficult they are to breed, and I agree with them. I believe it's difficult to breed, but I guess I just happened to do it right. So that's kind of the theory I'm going with.
It really depends on the pairs, because we were talking about this earlier too. Because I haven't had, as far as I know, no successful breedings, but I did have one breeding attempt. I tried introducing a pair on a box behind my couch, and that's where they decided to mate. And yeah, so it's just like, oh, perfect conditions, very picky. All right, you'll do.
Yeah,
on the floor.
No comment.
I'm not saying anything either. I still think that what really surprised me was that after the cool down period, when I introduced females into my male Oaxaca's cage, one of them, the bigger one, he started showing breeding displays, like mating displays, like his tail would shake, it would like vibrate back and forth. And that was something, because it was my first season, it was my first time ever pairing them, I had never seen any kind of activity like that. So I took a video of it and sent it to everyone, and I think the general consensus was that it was some sort of attempt at luring the female. So
my males do the same.
Yeah, the males will do that. So that was a surprise for me, because at the time I also knew that like people weren't having any success breeding them in captivity. And I was like, is that a good sign? Maybe, because I haven't seen other videos of them doing this. And yeah, I'm still convinced that the other male actually got the job done and it wasn't that one, but I think he warmed her up. That's what I'm saying.
Good competition.
Yeah. I have like
so
much on breeding. I have so much to say.
Well, what about the babies? Like, why is it such a challenge? Why are they just delicate? Is it just, what's the story?
So I do have experience with raising babies semi-successfully. When I got one female that I was not expecting to get. She was basically thrust upon me, and she had a litter very soon after, and I was very unprepared, but I managed to get them all set up in nanos. I did 2 per nano, which ideally you would want to do 1 per nano, but I just didn't have the space at the time. Like I said, I wasn't expecting to get a gravid female. And I would feed them black soldier fly larvae. I would feed them really small fruit flies and stuff, and they ended up growing, and I had them for about 5 months. And about the 6-month mark is when you start to like relax about it. They were all hand fed. They knew my scent. They knew me. Like they would come up onto my hand and they would eat from my hand and stuff. And then I bought a bag of moss off of Amazon that I had bought before. But it ended up having mites in it. And the mites ended up taking out all of the babies. And one of my, all of them, took them all out. And within like 2 weeks, it killed all of the babies. they just like couldn't handle it.
The species really doesn't do well with stress.
No, I think that I would also wager that they have like a very weakened immune system. But regardless, like they ended up taking out all the babies. They ended up taking out one of my adult Oaxaca. And it was really tough. Like it's one of the reasons why I ended up sending my gravid females to someone else, because I was like, I'm like nervous now. I like don't have a good track record anymore. But getting them to 5 months is still a huge accomplishment. It's not easy to like keep them alive. They can drown themselves. They love to die. Like they'll find any reason. And I really think though, now that I know that it was the moss, now that I know that it was the mites, I can be much more careful about that moving forward. I don't think that I'll have that kind of issue anymore, but I almost got them to that 6 month mark. So just that one little thing can change your whole like plans. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wasn't even in Ollie's position, and that was like one of the hardest few weeks I ever had to deal with.
Yeah, those mites were, I mean, I got rid of them in like 2 weeks though, man.
I've never seen someone eradicate mites faster than Ollie did.
I crushed those mites. Like I made it my entire life's mission to like destroy every single mite.
You said the mites came in on the moss, right?
They did, yeah.
There was a second person that got the same brand, and they also got mites.
Yeah.
I had that happen once actually, where I got moss, and I wasn't using it in my Vivaria. Actually, I just had a bucket of it that I was using for packing delis when I was shipping animals. And I shipped someone a lizard, and they were like, there's like all these little like mites on this lizard. And I was like, oh my God, what? And I like figured it out. It was this bucket of sphagnum that I had. So now whenever I get new sphagnum, I boil it before I use it. I like boil it before I even use it anymore, because I just don't want to do that. Thankfully, the person that I sent it to was a homie and was like very understanding, was like, oh, no worries. But it was stressful. And thankfully the lizard was fine.
I had just sold to Abronia. And one of the ways that we had found out that it was the mites was because the Abronia that had the mites were in cages with moss, whereas the other ones weren't. And I just so happened to sell 2 of them that were not like using the moss. But as soon as I realized I had mites, I like contacted those people, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I have no idea how this happened. I would have never sent you an animal had I known it had mites. But they were like, I don't know what you're talking about. They don't have mites. They're fine. So I was very close, but I had a similar situation.
I would really feel, I would like to ask a question about the, and this is, I might seem like an asshole here, so just hear me out.
Okay.
The breeder you were mentioning that you spoke to, who said that the theory might be that Oaxaca might be really picky, like the females might be picky. I would like to just unpack this a little bit more, because I would want to know the reason. Okay, let me offer a little backstory. I think that's something that's really common in the reptile community, especially with like lizards and people who are breeding lizards. People have a tendency to say things when they're pairing animals, and they say, oh, the male didn't get the job done. The male didn't get the job done. The male didn't get the job done. And look, obviously it has to happen from time to time, but like most male reptiles are viable. Like it's not like the male didn't get anything done. It's obvious when you look at many herps, not all of them, but many of them, it's like an obvious give and take. Like both the male and the female are communicating with each other and being indicative of whether or not receptivity is present. It's just the way it is. It's no secret to me. Like, for example, with the Uromastics, you can see there's an obvious receptive, like there's a difference between when you like put males in for the first time in the season. Then there's a difference between the 3rd week in a row when you're introducing males and females together and the way they interact with one another. And then there's, okay, the male's biting on the nape of the female, and the female's obviously receptive because they arch their tail, right? So like it's obvious that, to me anyway, it has nothing to do with the male being able to do anything. This is all about the whether or not the female is receptive either to that male or to that given point in time, right? So this breeder who said that maybe the female Oaxaca are picky, how would they come to that conclusion about pickiness? Like, why would it be that they conclude that the females are picky as opposed to this was the time when she was receptive? You know what I'm saying? Like,
you're probably completely right. It could have been that. Yeah.
Yeah. Just because it's one of those things where something that I really can't, I hate doing is like ascribing meaning to certain things. So like, and let me just be clear. I'm not saying either of you are doing this. Like this is just something that I broadly like to talk about because it wears on me a little bit. Like we always like to ascribe meaning to stuff like this. Like, the people saying, oh, the male didn't get the job done, or, oh, it was like the incubation, or, oh, it was this one thing. It's like, there are so many variables and confounding factors in herpetoculture, as we all know. And most of us have like very, very small sample sizes. And it takes most of us a long time before we have like what one might consider a statistically significant sample size. So, I just didn't know. The reason I'm asking about this is because I'm curious if you knew anything about if this breeder gave any rationale for why they said they might be picky. Because I don't know. Like, I've never kept a Abronia oaxaca. I could be just a total jackass. I don't know what I'm saying.
I have a few examples.
I'm curious. Yeah, please tell me. I want to know.
First, I want to say it sounds like you two are saying the same thing. Wouldn't the female not being receptive be the same as her being picky?
No, because the receptivity would matter. So pickiness implies that she's very particular about the male that she's mating with. But when I'm saying receptivity could mean that they merely.
Sorry, that's probably my misters.
Oh, okay. What the hell? It's like somebody's mowing the lawn over here. What's going on?
So then I do have an example, because my pairing that I had last year with my female Sega and my small male Arita, after that pairing, and I think at that time I had one female and 4 males.
Mm-hmm.
And after that pairing, my female using human terms, dislikes all of my males except for one. She'll flee, she'll chase the other ones, but one she will let crawl all over her, get close, everything like that.
And is that that's the one that she mated with?
Nope. She hates him. She'll chase him.
Okay, so couldn't it have more? But like that might not have anything. If it's not the male that she mated with, then like, I don't know. Maybe I'm getting bogged down in the weeds here, but like,
but there's 2 other males she didn't mate with. Sorry, and she also does not like them.
Right, but she could also be not liking the other males because they might be a threat to the baby she's going to bear in a little bit of time, right? So she might, like my Euromastix females, they show like a legitimate weird behavior when they're getting around the time where they're going to be receptive to mating. They lay out all day long. They're at their real nice peak temperature and peak body coloration, like real bright colors. They lay around outside. And in fact, animals that are otherwise maybe normally very skittish lose that skittishness and become much more calm when, even to me, picking them up and taking them out to move them into a different enclosure right around the time that they are receptive to mate. It's like it's super weird. I'm sure it's got to be some kind of hormonal change or something. Like there's a bunch of oxytocin rolling around in their blood, so they're just like chill. I have no idea. It's really weird.
Yeah. But like, the breeder in question though that Ollie is speaking of, that the community kind of figured. I'm gonna say his name wrong, so I'm sorry. But his name we call him. I call him Wojtek. Maybe he used the word picky because English isn't his first language. Right. That's a possibility. Sure, but 2, he is also one of the only keepers who produces babies, at least some species, almost every single year.
Sure, so and he's
one of the figureheads, if you will. Yeah.
Right. I mean, figureheads are wrong all the time, right? Like,
absolutely. I know it. I have been learning that.
I have been wrong countless. I'm not that I'm any figurehead of any variety. I'm just saying, like, I'm probably wrong more than anybody else ever. Like, I'm just wrong all the time. But I'm also comfortable being wrong. I don't care. You know, like,
have to be.
It's good. It's good. It's a good thing to make mistakes and be wrong from time to time, right?
Absolutely.
But it's like, it's one of those things where I feel like, especially if it just gets said by someone who's well known in a given community, like, people used to say,
Correlation, not
go back to-
causation.
correlation and right, all that, sure. But if I, Douglas Dix, who he was one of the best, he worked with Uromastics, 20-ish years ago. Wonderful guy. Like, he's an amazing person, super nice. And he did a lot of great work, like laying a lot of ground floor foundation and all this stuff. But to this day, the guy hasn't been breeding Euros for 15 years. He's not active in it anymore. He left that to do other things. He doesn't have any more Uromastics, and people still quote the care work that he put together and said, well, but as if it's like, oh, I'm doing it right because I read it in this one care guide by one guy who hasn't been doing this for 20 years, and again, none of this is, Doug is the man. Like, he sold me some of my first Euros. He's the guy who, he's encouraged me over the years. Like, he's a wonderful human being. I'm not saying Doug did anything wrong, right? What I'm saying is that a lot of us tend to have like a ceiling for where we stop questioning. You know what I mean?
Oh.
Like, you know what I'm saying? And I do it too. Yeah, please go.
Okay, so this is something that I say all the time. If someone is speaking as though it is fact, like if someone is absolutely, there are people like this in the Abronia hobby who will say things as though they are fact, right? But like in my experience with the Abronia, it's they will say these things as though like there's all this research behind it, but it's like anecdotal at best, And if someone is completely unwilling to change because they believe that they're doing it right, and they're not willing to like believe that they're wrong in any capacity, like we don't know enough about these animals to say anything like for sure,
Oh yeah.
I mean, and so like that's I really appreciate that you mentioned that like even if you feel as though you've mastered something, like once you feel you've mastered something, there's so much more to learn. Like I would be more willing to believe someone who says, like, I mean, Savannah and I have these conversations all the time. The amount of conversations that end in I have no idea.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, that's a healthy thing, right? But
it's extremely healthy.
This applies to all of this, right? This applies to all of the whatever conversation you want to have around herpetoculture. Like the hard reality is, if someone's conveying to you a sense of absolute certainty, there's a problem there. Like like there is so damn little hard, unadulterated, completely uncontroversial information about reptiles and amphibians and their care and captivity. The absolute, like, we're talking like real, like, the kind of shit you'd throw like in the New England Journal of Medicine. That bit tiny, absolutely tiny about reptiles and amphibians, tiny, a minuscule. And we've used this term. Sorry, Roy, I just finished it, and I'll we've used this term on the show, and people throw it around from time to time, but the vast majority of all of our keeping information is folklore husbandry. Right now, it doesn't mean it's wrong. Right. You can have, like, things can be working and going right and be moving in the right direction, and they can still be based in folklore. That's okay. That's totally fair too. But the reality is, that's just it. Unfortunately, that's one of the few unobjective, uncontroversial hard facts, is that it's rare that information is not that common. Sorry, Roy, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to add to that like this is something that I totally relate to, and it's like I've written several articles at this point. I try to write articles on every species that I produce here, so that I can at least offer information to people, buying herps from me, and every single one comes with like a disclaimer. It's like the first thing is a disclaimer, just being like, this is just what I do. I'm not saying it's the best way or the right way. This is what has worked for me, and I don't actually know if it's going to work for you. This is like the best thing I can offer you. Right. But I think especially, I mean, you spoke about like the difference between living in Colorado versus, Florida or, North Carolina or whatever. Where I live, like, this is one of the main reasons why I've chosen to not work with Abronia at all up to this point, is just that, like, if I have Abronia here and I have a power outage here in the summer, they're going to be cooked. Like, it's too hot here. Like, it's just not safe for me to keep them here. And so like, yeah, I just think that it's so, it depends. It depends.
Yeah.
Like there's like a saying in like the permaculture world where people are like, oh, so like this is my problem. What's the solution? And like the answer is always it depends. And it's like, sorry, I don't have like the yeah, exactly.
Permaculture.
Agreed.
That's the world.
Agreed.
It depends.
Agreed. It's the world. I completely agree. But we're living, within a civilization, and I feel like a time, within that civilization where people are very like they want the immediate
Yeah.
black and white answer. They want to be able to Google, how do I take care of my Abronia graminia?
Yeah.
Here's my recipe. Add 1.25 cup sugar, and then and then I'm good. But
and so this touches on something else too that I feel like came up a little bit earlier, and I'll use a little bit about how you each described yourselves as kind of maybe like for a mirror for what I'm talking about here. So Savannah, you were mentioning you're more of an all or nothing keeper, and Ollie, you were saying you don't consider yourself sort of like an all or nothing keeper in the same way.
I'm like right? Kind of go with the flow.
Yeah. So it's my opinion that one of the reasons it's really valuable in herpetoculture to remain really, really open and to not like, one of the reasons I tend to be allergic to certainty within herpetoculture anyway, is because like certainty alienates more people from what we do. And if we're really wanting to do the most benefit for the most animals and the most good that we can for the most animals and the most people, we have to draw a bigger circle and expand to envelop more people inside of herpetoculture. And that means that like, even though that, as Roy said, I same thing with my care guide. I preface my care guide with like this, there's more than one way to raise a happy, healthy Uromastyx. More than one. I like my way a lot, but there's more than one. And you don't have to do it my way just to do a good job. But like, you have to be able to, we have to let more people
if you don't do it Phil's way, you're wrong.
Yeah, it's probably true actually. Like I've been doing this a long time. I feel like I know everything now. So
yeah,
like,
I've kind of ended up in a position where a lot of people look to me for advice on one thing or another, and I try to just ward people off. And I think some in a way some things get lost in translation, because when I don't know the answer, I'll find it for them. So it kind of makes it seem like maybe I know everything.
You're not Google, dude. Make them Google. I do this.
That's dangerous, dude. You cannot let people do their own stuff. I'm joking.
But no, I firmly believe in sharing any knowledge I know. But I'm also a human being that has the ability to admit when I'm wrong and learn. But to circle back to breeding too, because this kind of, in my mind, proves the point that there's something we're missing. Because, and Ollie has witnessed this too, but they arrived at the goal. I didn't. During one of my pairings, I saw the male doing the signature tail shake. The female lifted her tail, but the male didn't try to mate.
Right.
So there is something missing. Like there's no definites we have, especially with this species, among many, many others.
I really like that about Abronia though. Like I have to say, I love being in like such a grassroots community because it leaves so much open to exploration. So like during my first time breeding them, I had nothing to go off of. I knew that they had to be cool during a certain part of the year. And then I didn't really have anything other than that. Like maybe you keep them apart, maybe you keep them together. Like, there was so much of that. And when I started to notice that even though I had separated them, because it sometimes is recommended that you separate them and then bring them back together after the cooling period, and I wasn't getting any results, I thought to myself, well, how could I kind of speed things along? And the first thing that came to mind for whatever reason was to put the males in nanos. And I kept them separate from the females. I took them out of their enclosure. I put them in nanos and I waited. I think I put them in there for about 2 weeks. And then I put them back in with the females. I don't know why I thought to do it. It just seemed like, something we're trying. I didn't see any results. And then I thought to myself, well, what if I kept them in each other's nanos now without cleaning them? So now they've got like an enclosed space. They're surrounded by the scent of another male. Like, hopefully that will agitate them. And so I kept them. I only did that for like 2 or 3 days because I didn't want to stress them out too bad. And then as soon as I put the males in with the females, I saw results. So like, you know, and that was just something that I thought off the top of my head. I had no like evidence that it would work. Nobody else had tried it as far as I knew. And it worked. And it's, I just think that that's such a fun part of this hobby, is to find things that work. And I think that really only comes with something like, well, I mean, I guess now that we've had this whole conversation, it's something that you could do in any established community, but because this one is so small and like just starting, I think that it's something that you find a lot here, where you just have a lot of wiggle room. You have like a lot of room to try new things, and nobody can say like, oh, that won't or that will work yet, you know, because I just did something new and it ended up working. So like, who's to say what else will work, you know?
Right. Totally. Well, this kind of leads me a little bit to the creation of y'all's Abronia support group, your Discord server. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that, and just kind of like, I mean, the impetus to that, I mean, it seems kind of obvious from the conversation so far, but if you could just speak to it a little bit, what does it look like and how's it going so far with that?
I think it's going great. It was founded mainly because the Facebook chat wanted a Discord. Then they didn't really, and Ollie made it. I offered to help moderate it. Some of them joined. Not they didn't really use it. They still use the Facebook chat. And so we just kind of started building our own community. And I think one of the biggest focuses of us was Ollie and I have both been scammed, and I'm a very tolerant person, but one thing I will not tolerate under almost any circumstance is dishonesty.
Yeah.
Especially when disclosure could save the animal. So our primarily was to get people who are keeping them together to collect information, to see if there's any overlap or what didn't work, speculation, but mostly we also wanted to include people who were interested in keeping Abronia and to protect them from smugglers and scammers, because that's rampant in the hobby.
It's horrible.
You know? So we kind of don't really, I don't think we've had to turn anyone away. Like, we've
had to turn a couple people away.
we don't
for one reason or another. We've had to tell people no, and sometimes I'll veto people if like they just are, if I believe that their views don't really align with like what we're trying to do, then like I'll veto it. I'll be like, yeah, I don't think
there's some pretty awful people in the community. I will say that we don't.
Let's not. But basically, the idea is to get like a bunch of like-minded people together so that we can create this network of trustworthy people that we can turn to, whether we need information, whether we want to maybe start like some trades or some loans or something. And it's something that we've had some success with. We've made some matches, as I like to say. But ultimately it's about like protecting the Abronia and by kind of discouraging and leading people away from the, I don't want to call it like the easy choice or the inexpensive choice, but leading people away from bad situations that they could find themselves in. Because I know Savannah she's mentioned it. Like, I have been scammed. I've been through the heartbreak of prepping for an animal and then getting something else that I didn't buy, or just straight up not getting an animal. Even from like brick and mortar stores, you'll find that too now. Like, it's so difficult to find trustworthy sources of Abronia. And so like we have like a do not buy, do not sell list. Like we always usually people will come to us, which I really appreciate, if they find one on the market and they don't know if it's coming from a legitimate source. Then we can all do our research to kind of better like sift through the bad stuff, you know.
Right.
So really that's what I like to say that it's for. I like to say that it's for like minded people who are interested in keeping and breeding, who would like to sort of end the culture of like buying from incorrect sources is what I'll call them.
And we've definitely made it a big point not to tolerate people withholding information.
Yeah, gatekeeping is absolutely not acceptable. Like it just completely goes against our mission. So is it's not really acceptable to lie about the origins of your animal. If you got an animal from a smuggler at some point, you didn't know any better, we've been there.
Like one of my last males I had on Morph Market listed as wild caught, but long-term captive. He's been seen by my vet. And then I saw so many ads get taken down by Morph Market, but mine always stayed up there. So there is like your ethics. How much of your ethics does it cost just to try to make money?
Yeah, it's not about that. Like we stress really heavily that this is not a market. Like our server is not like where you would go to like, I don't know, like just market yourself. Like that's not really what we're trying to do. We're not trying to like,
we have applications you can fill out. So if someone does have an animal they want to sell, they can see your care and everything. That's really it. But I also like that people come to us and say, hey, this person's selling this Abronia. Like, do you know anything about this animal? Because chances are I've seen that animal. I know who it came from at some point. I'll figure it out.
Yeah, Savannah's really good at that specifically. Like in hands, you start to like recognize like people's hands because of how they like the pictures. So I'll see. There was actually someone who was trying to scam people on Fauna, and I immediately recognized their hands as someone I worked with. And I was like, I mean, like, it wasn't someone that I see like their hands all the time, but like I follow them on like Instagram and stuff. And like, I know their setups. I know what their hands look like. And even something like that could be useful because it's like, I know whose pictures you're stealing. I know that you're not actually selling this animal. So. Yeah.
People steal photos. So we definitely.
Watermark.
I'm a very protective friend. Yeah.
Watermark
don't work. Person.
Watermarks don't work. Let me assure you right now, watermarks do not work.
But you can remove them with app, can't you?
They're pretty easy to remove, especially with you can use not that I'm trying to tell people how, but it's obvious information. You can use content aware fill in Photoshop, really, really easily pull a watermark off of an image. And also, speaking from my own experience, people don't give a shit if your photo has a watermark on it. They'll just use it anyway.
Yeah.
Because they do it with mine.
But hopefully most people will Google the watermark.
Yeah.
They don't.
I also don't think, I don't know. I think the people, having had conversations with some of the people who are like trying to scam people out of Abronia, I don't think they're really smart enough to.
Some of them are really bright.
Most of the scammers are from Cameroon, and they don't even change their Facebook URL.
No.
Yeah.
Let me just speak out for the sake of Matt Tejan, the former guest on the show. Wonderful keeper, zookeeper. He's a great guy. He was scammed recently, and it was obvious to him that the scammer was well embedded in the herp community because this person knew all the lingo, knew all of the ways to talk and communicate as a herp keeper, and this whole thing. I think he lost a lot of money. Some of the scammers are absolutely what you're saying. They're in who knows where, right? They're in some other part of the world and they're scamming. That's there. Those ones are real easy to sift for most of the time, but there are legitimate, intelligent, very well conceived scammers out there doing crazy shit. So
there's also, at least in the Abronia community, I don't know how it works, but within like the last year, there have been a lot of big names that have turned to scamming. Like people who have like a well-established, like Sav got scammed by one of them, where they have like a very big name, someone that you would know like right off, like as soon as someone says it,
big enough name that someone with an even bigger name vouches for them.
Yeah, and then they this is what happens where they'll establish this reputation. I'm not saying that this specific person did it because I don't have any evidence for that, but like they'll get these wild caught females that have the babies. We've talked about this, and then they'll just keep getting the supply of wild caught females and sell them as though like they bred them. And so like half the time you can't even, because they don't have lock pictures. If you're looking for a captive bred baby, like ask for a lock date, ask for pictures of the lock, because most likely the person who is breeding them will take pictures of it. They'll be selling like these animals as though they bred them themselves. with no proof, but because they just have like this constant influx of babies, people assume that they're extremely successful, but then they end up selling off. And we've seen this a lot this past year where big names will just sell off their collections because they're not actually making any money off of them. Like the babies will die. The females, they won't actually be able to get the females to breed for themselves. So they're constantly having to fork over more money for more gravid females, and then they're not making it back. These animals die for whatever reason because they're really good at it. And it leaves these people who are seemingly, you know, really big in the hobby, like supposed to be these really big names, and they're not actually doing anything. They're selling out because they don't have any money to like sustain themselves off of this. It's another reason why I'm saying, like, I don't know, just be aware, try to be more aware of the person you're buying from. Like, don't just take what they're saying at face value, ask questions. You know, I've fallen victim to that before when I've been a little bit too eager to get into an animal, you know?
Yeah.
But that's why we're doing what we do, you know?
It also, so this is worth noting too, because people, again, this is real similar to Uromastics. People do this all the time. They're just flipping animals, flipping wild caught stuff. And there's a very I actually put out a video on my Instagram about this. There's like a pretty well known kind of pathway that people will go down when, you know, because you say, oh, you got to ask questions to whoever the source is that you're trying to buy these animals from. A lot of times those sources know how to play that game and kick the can down the road. So it's like, oh, hey, are these wild caught or captive bred? Oh, they're captive bred. Oh, okay. Who's the breeder? Or, I mean, excuse me, they'll say, do you have pictures of the parents mating or the eggs hatching? And they'll say, oh, you know, we didn't breed them. We got them from the breeder. Who's the breeder? Oh, the breeder's like a local person, you know, who
I get that a lot. Yeah.
Who wants to remain unnamed, you know, who wants to remain anonymous. It's like, this is all nonsense. This is just bullshit. That's not out there, right? That's not actually happening. And like, because the more and more you put where are all these hidden Uromastics breeders in the world, right? So it's like, where all, you know, and especially why would they be selling their animals to a shop when they could sell them on their own for more money in the first place? Like, if you were trying to make money off of them in the first place, why would you sell them to a shop when you could just sell them out online and make more money, especially for animals that are valuable like Uromastics or an Abronia? Like, why would you do it that way? And then further, paying attention to the market itself. Give it a few months. Notice how 1 month there'll be a flood of Uromastics ornata on the market in the hands of about 10 or 11 different wholesalers, and all of them are labeled captive bred.
Yeah.
How does that happen? That's not how that works. Just have a, you know, like a widen that aperture. It's just not real.
I mean, it could be dependent on like the species. It could be dependent on like when they lay or whatever. But like, it's something that Savannah and I are noticing a lot too. Like with the Abronia, where like all of a sudden there will be a ton of them on the market, and they'll be captive born or captive bred or whatever. Yeah, and it's and I'm like, okay. Meanwhile, like they send you pictures of the parents, and they are yellow, like they are fresh, you know. So I don't know. That's just another reason why we have the Discord. It's just another reason why, like, we encourage people to come to us. Don't try. Yeah, we're so like, it's really sad that it's like gotten to that point. But like, you have to have your guard up like that, or else you're just gonna lose a ton of money. I have.
But it is also true. It also remains true that every one of those animals deserves a good home too. So, you know, like, this is something that I struggle with too, because, you know, we try to, macadamias.
Filling his macadamias.
Really good, man. It is also true that there's probably omega-7s, rare source of omega-7s. It is true that if you, let's pretend there's 1,000 animals that just came in of whatever it is in the market, and everyone in the market has learned, oh, I don't buy from these guys because they're full of shit, and they're, you know, these animals are going to cause me a headache and whatever. Nobody buys them. Those animals just sit there at that wholesaler's for God knows how long until they die. That's also a tragedy, right? So it's like, it's weird. It's kind of a drag how the knife can cut in both directions. You know, think about it all the time with the Uromastics. It's the same thing. Obviously, the idea would be to make it so people don't feel like they need to bring them in anymore from the wild because there's a sufficient number of them here, of course, you know, but that's also a drag, you know?
And that also furthers that could also strengthen claims of being captive born.
How so?
If there's a bunch of people working with them and they're even established, they can still bring in the wild cots saying, oh no, it's from lineage. It's like Reptec was a really big name for Abronia.
People do that with Euros.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, these were produced by Areds only. Sure they were.
Yeah, we recently had to kind of make a really difficult decision like that, where like it's like, do you offer the information to someone who's going to use that to just hurt more animals? Like if they don't know how to keep them, they get all these wild caught animals and then they start failing. Like,
Yeah.
do
We
you
didn't even
give,
get a choice in this case. All the animals that came in on an import, apparently they're not doing well now.
yeah. And so like Savannah came to me and was like, what do we do? Like, do we help them? And my answer was, I don't think so. Because like, if we just make it easier for them, then we're not really doing what we set out to do. And it is a huge tragedy. I lose sleep thinking about like the animals that die that way. But it's something that I see a lot with like the whole debate on brick and mortar pet stores and whether they should sell live animals and because they get them from farms or whatever. And every time this is the idea, is like every time you buy them, you're just opening up a new spot for another animal to come in. I kind of like take that approach when it comes to like these people who buy from smugglers. Like, I don't want to give them any more reason to buy more animals. Like, I'm not going to buy from them. Like, I don't want to give them any, like, if they end up buying a bunch of animals, they spent all that money and they have a bad experience because either nobody bought them, which is probably what's happening because they're so expensive, or they just end up failing, then why would they go back and do it again? I mean, I'm sure like, people will, but the idea is to kind of like lessen the chance of that. So it's really difficult.
Right.
It's a really difficult position.
But it's also a drag because we have ball pythons, which are bred ruthlessly in captivity and still get brought in from the wild all the time, every year in the thousands, and it's like, it's there are examples of the ways in which captive propagation has not sated the demand and not prevented the importation of wild caught animals. So there's got to be some kind of like middle ground in which helping educate and set up relationships with those importer exporters to say, hey, buy from me, don't buy from this, don't buy from, don't buy ornates directly from Egypt. Get an account with me. I'll sell you a few hundred a year. That'll be fine. We're done. Like you've got legitimately captive bred animals. I'm going to talk with you and consult with you about how to care for them in the interim. Maybe I won't send them all to you at once. Maybe we'll have a relationship where, you get an order for one, you fulfill it through me and you pay me a kickback, right? There's got to be some middle ground because it's obvious that not to use the saying from earlier, but the all or nothing approach, that doesn't, at least in this context, it might not work, right? Because that's what we see. And by all means, like I'm in favor of that kind of, I would prefer it to work that way. I would love if all of the work that I'm doing, that I'm putting in all the time, that I've been putting in for 10, 12 years to propagate healthy, available, happy, captive bred, ornate uromastics, the fact that there's such a demand for those, the reality is people are constantly still bringing them in. Every 6 months, someone's bringing in another shipment of several hundred, undercutting my prices and selling them out to unsuspecting people, and all the while, if you have a good relationship with the customer base and the people who looking for the animals, then that's not that hard. But there's lots of people who are coming into the hobby every day who have no idea. And so they just Google it, and whatever the first thing that pops up, the first thing they can find is the thing they're going to go for, right? So in some ways, it almost like, as much as we should put as much effort as we possibly can into educating buyers and making sure people make patient, good choices when they're going to buy the reptiles that they're looking for, I think we should do that. It almost seems like a shorter path to victory to actually bring in some of the people who we're trying to fight against and say like, hey, maybe we can meet in the middle here. So you're not having to do this. Yeah, you might have to pay a little bit more, but you're going to have a steady, consistent stream. You probably make up for it. And all the animals you don't have to refund for because of the ones that didn't survive, that you sold to customers that died because you didn't give them the proper care, just work with me, collaborate with me, and we'll set something up. That to me seems like a shorter path to the end result that we're all looking for. But obviously, I have no idea. It's just something I've been thinking about for a long time and irritates the hell out of me. So I have no idea if that's like a viable path forward. Maybe that's not available out there, but it does seem like there are more and more pet shops that I get contacted by who say, hey, we really want to make an effort to work with only captive bred animals when and where we can. And with those individuals, with those pet shops, as long as we develop a good rapport, I'll sell them those captive bred animals, which I normally wouldn't because it's a loss for me, you know? So there's, you know, I'd normally just hold on to them and sell them to someone, individuals who come to me looking for a pet. That would be better, but there's so many ways this can kind of play in and against the goals we're trying to reach. You know what I mean?
I know this isn't unique to the Abronia community, but I've vaguely mentioned some foul individuals I've met, but there are definitely people who refuse to give information because they have the intention to corner markets.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
That's horrible.
Of course.
And I think with the whole dilemma, honestly, I think people should stick to their ethics and not compromise that. Whichever way that may lean, I think that's up to someone because you can justify either side. And No. What you were saying, either buy from them to save the animals or don't let them die so they stop getting animals.
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, obviously, I just meant that at least on that particular topic, I'm just saying that like the animals that are presently there at the importer's facility, they have needs too, you know?
Yeah,
like it's
Yeah.
That's all I meant by that. Not necessarily to justify that side of it. And also, like all of our animals originate from wild caught animals in the first place. So it's like, if we want to have them here, there's got to be some, which is why I've always appreciated the Philippe de Vaugelis from Few Many.
Right. And that's why I value honesty and full disclosure. If someone can be honest about what they're doing, then I dislike them a little less.
Right. For sure. Absolutely.
Well, we're coming up on almost an hour and 40 minutes. So, but there's still some things I want to talk about. First, I would love to hear a little bit about Savannah, your setups, because we've already acknowledged that we were going to mention those. And they deserve to have a highlight on them. And then after that, I would love to hear from both of you about some kind of more general questions before we come to our close. If that sounds good. Is that good with y'all?
Yeah. I think anyone who were to observe me putting together an enclosure might be very concerned for my mental health and physical health. I often hate everything I make. I'm rarely ever happy with it. I try to design things to encourage my animals to move in certain ways, to get them to climb vertically, to get more exercise. I like to redo the enclosures every few months because that gets them exploring if they've become a little stagnant. But yeah, no, I just kind of envision paths out of branches with centerpieces and I just kind of just make them curious. And I watch to see how they go. Like some of my smaller, more fit Abronia, I'll give them more challenging branches to climb. I try to pick plants that are at least somewhat native to them because some of them are long-term captives. Yeah, I don't know. There's feng shui to it, but there's a lot of efficiency, I guess, like how the animal can use the enclosure, and then me trying desperately to make it also look nice. And my enclosures look a lot better in person than they do in photos.
But they look pretty good in photos, though.
They look really good in photos. Yeah.
They look all right. They look fine.
Taking photos of them is my least favorite part because I hate it. No, but this is one of the reasons why I love the hobby. I love putting together the enclosures. I like seeing what I can do. And I never thought I would be so happy to find awesome sticks.
It's true. Yeah, I mean,
the bucket of sticks.
Well, I encourage everybody to give you a follow on Instagram and have a look at your setups, because I feel like yeah, they're just really exemplary. And I definitely see what you're talking about of just encouraging movement and like utilizing the full volume of the setup. I think you do a really good job of that. And that's something I see consistently being a struggle for folks. So check them out, everybody. Yeah. And I guess with that, let's transition a little bit here into some kind of broader questions. I feel like we've been talking a lot about in this conversation about what we would like to see change in herpetoculture, which is good and constructive. And I'm also curious if there's anything that each of you are like currently really excited about in herpetoculture, like anything that you're seeing, trends, accomplishments, other keepers, anything that is like got you like, yes, this is awesome. I want to see more of this.
I am super enthusiastic about naturalistic keeping. I really like, they're not perfect, but I really like the Arcadia luminized lights because the dimming, I like the sunrise, sunset mimicry. It's not perfect. It's not exactly what I want it to be, but it's we're leaning in the right direction. I love making things as natural as possible. Jeez. I don't really have much of a personality outside of Abronia, but like
I feel similarly. I feel the same way. I'm like, how am I going to answer this question and not make it Abronia based?
You know, like next month I'm supposed to be having some Abronia imported, like actually imported, that I know is 100% legitimate by the books. Their permits have been approved, but we won't know until they actually cross over the border. So I'm really hopeful for that because I think that'll really give us as a community more options to have imports from the United States. Sorry, not the United States, Europe, to the United States, because I think a lot of European breeders or everywhere else, they don't want to export to the United States because they take so long to do paperwork. So I'm kind of using this as like hope that come on, we don't have to get smuggled animals. It's not the only way. So that's what I'm most excited about.
Awesome.
I personally like, I'm not super active on like social media. I'm not super active on like keeping up with other keepers per se. Like unless they're in the server, then I try to be like communicative and stuff. But since we've touched on it before, I like what I'm seeing where people are like, I mean, I'm kind of newer to actually being in the reptile hobby. But like what I'm noticing in the past year that people are trying to be more ethical about their sourcing. Like at least in the spaces that I'm in, I've noticed that. It could be something that's been developing for a really long time that I just haven't been privy to. But I do like seeing that. I like seeing the switch towards like more ethical keeping or like being acceptable of like newer forms of keeping, like people just being more open-minded about that kind of stuff. Whereas I know like one of the reasons why I'm not super active in like Facebook group pages is because if you could be keeping an animal like correctly, like you could be keeping it like well for that animal, that particular animal. But as you can see, like, I mean, as you can kind of see, like my setup for my Abronia is entirely different from Savannah's. And yet like both of them work. Like we found that both of them are doing what they need to do. Like all of the animals are happy, all of the animals are healthy. So I think that like acceptance is really nice. Like critical acceptance, I think, where people are still willing to learn and still willing to ask questions, and are still willing to change, basically. I think I like that a lot.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I like that the hobby needs more tolerance and understanding.
Definitely. Agreed on that. A lot less tearing people down and a lot more building them up and encouraging them, I think is
right.
Is
Stop making people afraid to ask for help.
Yeah, people should be allowed to ask for help.
Yeah, agreed. Well, what about I guess just kind of like casting our gaze to the future a little bit. I'm curious what goals each of you might have for like what's next. I have a feeling I know, but I'm curious to hear from y'all. What are your goals?
I would love more than anything to produce Aritas. If everything goes perfectly, I'll have 3 unrelated pairs, and I just want to be successful. And I've kind of been like setting myself some small goals, like whether trying to start pushing somehow more towards reintroduction programs for the babies, because you can't really do that with adults. And also, I kind of been recently throwing around the idea of somehow working as like a government approved rescue shelter, basically, where if animals are confiscated, instead of them being euthanized or God knows what, they would give them to us to take care of.
That'd be cool.
So that's
Sweet.
just like a small thing I've been throwing around in my head.
That'd be cool.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. Definitely worthwhile. What about you, Ollie?
I have so many like things that I want to do.
Chameleon farm.
Well, not a farm. Yeah, I mean, if you're asking like about personally what we would like to do in the future, I would really like to buy a franchise. There's one franchise that's local to my area that is actually really great. It's not like global or anything. It's like very small. Maybe some sort of like it's like a reptile based franchise. I would like to start a chameleon rescue, because like as much as I love Abronia, like my passion is really with chameleons. And I just, they're like my heart species. I like love chameleons. I would like to start a Oaxaca network of Oaxaca breeders. Right now I have 2 pairs. There may be one more pair in the United States. But I would like to start like a very small group of people who are really focused on producing Oaxaca in captivity. Because I feel like if I've done it once, I could do it again. Like we could figure this out, you know, we can kind of unlock the secrets of that. And I'd like to work with some wildlife rescue. There's a local wildlife place near me. I think I'm going to probably try to shoot for an internship with before I graduate. Those are all kind of the things I'm hoping to do.
Awesome.
Cool.
All worthy things. Cool.
Busy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as it should be. It's good to be that. Well, I feel like maybe we should move towards our closer. What do you think, Phil?
Yeah. It seems like the right move.
Okay. Do you want to hit it?
Yeah, for sure. So the closer, the question we ask everyone when the show ends is why herpetoculture? And that can be everything from like why you do it to why do we do it broadly? Like what's it worth? Why is it good for anything? Why is it not? You know, that whole scene. So yeah, why herpetoculture? And you know, whichever would like to go first doesn't matter.
I guess I could go first. I've always had this impression that reptiles get kind of the short end of the stick when it comes to keeping. I see it all the time, and I'm sure you could say about with like other animals or whatever. But for me, like I as someone who did a lot of rescuing, I saw firsthand the way that reptiles are mistreated every day. I mean, I worked in a pet store. I saw it myself. It was one of the reasons why I had to leave, because it's so hard to see that kind of suffering. And now my focus has moved more towards Abronia, but the truth is the same. Like, I see them failing all the time too. So I kind of went into it with a bleeding heart, I think. I really just wanted to do the most that I could to like help the ones that I felt needed help. And that's kind of why I chose reptiles, is because like everybody is like, yeah, okay, we'll say, sorry, that seems kind of insensitive, but like people are so willing to reach a helping hand out to mammals, you know, puppies, dogs, cats, kittens, even hamsters, like things like that, fluffy things like that. And I love the underdog, and I saw reptiles weren't in my space, like getting the kind of attention that they needed. So that's what got me into like herpetoculture, I guess is what you could call it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Nice.
It's really hard to answer. Like, I've never really been one who had many hobbies. It's always just kind of been like play video games. That's really all I did. And as you already asked, like I didn't have a magnificent or significant, in my opinion, origin story. So I kind of just on a whim got into the hobby, and as cliche as it sounds, I don't know, like I fell in love with it because I don't know, it was something I was innately good at. It was something that didn't intimidate me into quitting because I kept doing it wrong. It was something I did and enjoyed and didn't get tired of, and still don't get tired of. Like every day, like I dedicate a large portion of my day to my animals, and I love it because I'm not normally a person who enjoys having a lot of responsibility, but this was something that kind of just came naturally to me. And there is the factor that like the species I work with, I really have strong disdain for how they're exploited, because and it's not only the animals too, it's the keepers who are interested in getting them too. I see people and animals getting taken care of, and I don't know, it kind of fuels me to make it, to do what I can to put a dent in it, to get, just
Sure.
tell people, hey, like that's not right. That's not how that's supposed to be. That's unacceptable. Just
Sure.
I'm a supportive person.
Yeah, totally.
Nice. Great. Good answers. I like that.
Yeah, it's good to hear. I feel like, I don't know, I really like hearing the different reasons why people do this thing, and I feel like there's so many different reasons, and it doesn't get old hearing from it. So thanks for that. Where can folks find y'all and like follow your work? Where can they find the Discord? All those questions. How do they get in touch?
I would say that you could message us on Instagram.
Yeah.
Just kind of message us with like a, hey, I saw you on the podcast, and I was interested in maybe being a part of like the Discord group. We're pretty like relaxed about it. As long as people aren't coming in for the wrong reasons, then like I'm sure that we'd be happy to accept them. But I only have for reptiles specifically, I only have my Instagram, which is Wholesome Herps. One word, cool. I think.
Yeah, I'm Perfect Hue LLC on Instagram, and I'm more than happy to talk to anyone. I can't tell you how many times I've answered the same questions over and over and over again, and I'm never tired of it.
Yeah, I feel similarly.
And if you want to join the Discord, if you're interested in learning about Abronia or keeping them, or just want to see pictures, you're more than welcome to join. But I just want to like get to know you as an individual first before letting you onto the server.
It's fair. Well, awesome. Well, thanks y'all. I think that's it.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you both making time to talk today. And I definitely learned a lot about Abronia today. So hopefully our listeners did as well. And we'll have to do this again down the road.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Started your Abronia rescue and Oaxaca network breeding facility.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much for having us. Yeah.
Of course. Thank you. Sweet.